What is up, peeps? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Movement6. Before we get into this, I just want to pause and thank you all for the support in the last few weeks. I've made a lot of changes in my content, the way I edit, took some courses left and right, and really start focusing on bringing, in the way I bring the content to all of you. And the past week or so, I grew with about 200 subscribers, so I couldn't be more happy. I'm grateful for all your comments, your likes, your interactions, and your subscribing to my channel. Thanks for that. If you're new here, drop a like, subscribe, hit those notifications button so you will not miss a thing. Now, the second thing, I am a huge Resident Evil fan. I was there when it first came out, and to this day, the first one, Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica X, and the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis are my top favorites of all Resident Evils. So, eventually for me, the series lost its mojo a bit down the way. Yes, there were some good games that are not really Resident Evil for me. Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 7, and good games, but not really Resident Evil to me. So when they announced Resident Evil 9 Requiem and more started to pour out on what they're trying to achieve here, I was genuinely excited about the direction they're going to take, because it almost felt that they were going back to what Resident Evil made so good. And I just finished Resident Evil 9 Requiem for the third time, and that's why I always wait for about a week or so to really dive in and to get a good feel of the game. I've played it on Assisted, which is a bit cheating maybe, but really wanted to get a feel on the story and dive in the surroundings. And then I played the game on the normal modes and really to absorb what's given on that front. And I'm just gonna say it. This is a true return to form for the series in general. They're not copying a specific era of what made it good, but they're blending what made classic Resident Evil special with what modern Resident Evil does best, which is obviously focus a bit more on action. And what really surprised me is how much care is in the details presented in both modes. The visuals, the audio, the pacing of the story, and the way the game splits its identity between Grace and Leon, it's without feeling messy at all. It really blends in nicely. So let's break it down properly. Well, why it looks insane, even on a base PS5, I will get into that. What the PS5 Pro is adding to your experience from a technical perspective, how the audio design elevates the tension, especially with those roaming threads, and how the two characters blend the structure of survival horror and action together, plus the story and the pacing. Now, I will try to be spoiler free as much as possible, but if you haven't played it yet, obviously maybe you need to take care on proceeding with the video, but again, I will be as spoiler free as much as possible. At the very end, I will touch upon a few things that I really do not like and actually think is a weird design choice. But that's just being disclaimer here, right? So before we start, again, I will be spoiler free as much as possible. And the gameplay is what you're going to see in this video for the most part from the first half of the game. And everything is captured on a base PS5, but I will show you footage of a PS5 Pro and the difference between those two systems. For now, let's start and get into it. So the first thing I want to dive into are the visuals. And even on a base PS5, Requiem looks absolutely ridiculous. It's not just, oh, we've got some high resolution left and right. It's the combination of lighting, materials, density that really sells this whole game. So the question is, what makes it feel next level? So the first thing is the lighting and the contrast that you will see in the entire game. The game uses darkness the way classic Resident Evils did maybe. Not as a filter, but more as a gameplay thing. Your corner swallow detail until your light hits it. The gameplay with your lighter that gives you some feeling of what's going on there. Switching the lights on and off. It really it really sells the game in terms of atmosphere. The second one is material realism. Wet concrete, decayed wood, cracked titles. Everything has texture that reads even when you're moving. It's the whole game just breathes an atmosphere from the lighting, the contrast to the material. It is already in this space. This game deserves an award for what it's presenting on base PS5, PS5 Pro, PC. Obviously, is the uncrowned king of the presentation of the visuals. But even the base PS5 deserves credit and a prize for that. The facial detail. If you go to the character models, if you just see the character models, if you see the cutscenes, the subtle micro expressions during 10 scenes are some of the best Capcom has ever done with the RE engine. The overall atmospherics, fog layers, dust, volumetric lighting, it just doesn't look pretty. They create ambiguity. You never feel sure what you're actually seeing, which is perfect for horror. In that, the RE engine, they knocked it out of the ballpark. Clean images, strong art direction, lighting that tells the story for you, the overall look and feel of the game, the cutscenes. RE engine has reached a level that was building in the last few years already with the remakes, with the remake of 4 and RE2, all the other games that run on RE engine, and they really reached that next level with this engine. The second thing is the PS5 Pro advantages. Now, if you're on a PS5 Pro, Requiem is one of those games where the difference isn't just numbers, it's clarity. I did play it at a friend's house on the PS5 Pro, but I just own 2 base PS5s. One here in the studio, one in the living room. And until this point, I really did not saw the immediate need to upgrade at all. But Resident Evil 9 finally does give a very well and good reason to do so. So if you're in the market to upgrade and you haven't played this game and you want to do an upgrade, this is the moment, because this engine or this game really ties into the new advantages that the PS5 Pro is giving you. Capcom and Sony have talked about Requiem using an updated PSSR upscaling pipeline on the PS5 Pro, specifically calling out better handling of fine detail like textures, hair rendering, but also crank up the ray tracing a notch. To make sure you all feel the difference, I used some footage of this amazing channel, I always trip on this name, so I'm sorry for that. El Analista de Bits. I highly encourage you to follow this channel, because he gives such a good comparison between systems of the same game. So what you clearly see here is a cleaner image reconstruction. PSSR job is to take a lower internal resolution and reconstruct it to a sharper final output. So the result is less shimmer in foliage, thin geometry, cleaner edges in motion, and better stability when the camera whips around, which happens a lot in combat in Resident Evil, right? So the second thing it's giving you is a ray tracing model that actually hold. Multiple performance breakdowns indicate PS5 Pro offers a 60 frames per second option with ray tracing plus a high refresh performance up to 120 Hz with ray tracing off. That matters because ray tracing in horror isn't just pretty for reflection, it affects shadow accuracy in tight spaces, how light bounces off in hallways, and whether rooms feel flat or alive. And this is where it really shines. The third thing that it will give you is motion clarity. Leon's action-heavy segments benefit massively from higher, steadier frame rates. When you're aiming, quick turning, reacting, the game simply feels more responsive and more readable. And these are actually then the settings I would recommend. If you want maximum atmosphere, go for 60 frames per second and ray tracing on the PS5 Pro. If you want maximum responsiveness, especially for Leon in that action-oriented segments, high refresh performance mode with ray tracing off would give you 120 Hz if you have a display that can handle that, obviously. On a base PS5, you will still get a stunning presentation. Let's be honest, the direction carries it, but Pro is really the showcase version here. So the third thing is audio design. Fear you hear before you see. So that is actually what it is. Let's talk about what Requiem then really does better than almost any modern horror game right here. It's the audio. The game understands a core horror truth. The silent soundtrack advantage, I would say. A lot of time, the game doesn't lean on music. It leans on presence. Some reviews even call out how ambient sound carries huge weight because music is used just not all the time. There are segments that you will not hear music at all, but it gradually builds up. Especially when you have this roaming boss effect that is quite dominant in this title. When you have large enemies roaming the environment, sound becomes the warning system. You can hear him from the distance, closing in. And yes, Resident Evil 2 with Mr. X already had that, but there were some terrible issues with the audio where you cannot really pinpoint from what side he was coming. With this new overhauled audio system in the RE engine, you have heavyweight footsteps that change based on distance, and you can really pinpoint where it is. Directional cues that makes you hesitate at intersections. You really need to pause to understand it. And subtle environmental reactions, rattle, cracks, disturbed debris, or the change you hit. It all have sound, and that bounces off perfectly in the environment. Because the game uses spaces so well, you get moments where you stop moving just to listen where things are happening. That is, for me, high-level horror design. It slows the player down. One, because you really need to understand where things are coming from. It forces your decision making. That's two. And it creates dread without showing actually anything. There were times that I was actually frightened to go around the corner because I heard there was something going on there. So if you're playing with headphones or the 3D audio, Requiem becomes a vastly different experience. It's more intimate, more tense, more real. So I really advise you to play with a 3D audio capable headphone. I played the more story-oriented part of this game with a headset on. Was absolutely phenomenal. I also tried it downstairs with my Dolby Atmos installation. Was perfect, but headphones are really the way to go if you really want to get immersed in that. So the fourth thing is actually the biggest characteristics of that game, right? Grace versus Leon. Two Resident Evil games that actually blends perfectly at this point. One of the smartest decisions in Requiem is they don't try to be that one thing. Also, Resident Evil had to evolve in new directions, right? And one of the things they implemented is the split between Grace and Leon. And they represent two different philosophies of Resident Evil. Capcom and PlayStation have been very clear. Grace is more evasion, puzzle, resource management, while Leon pushes towards more assertive, action-forward scenes. To be really fair, I never really bought into or leaned into that part of Resident Evil because I come from that time where Resident Evil entered. My notion of Resident Evil has always been more the Grace section, the tense resource management, feeling helpless, feeling a bit underpowered at most of the times as well. That's where I think Resident Evil has always shined. But they've blended really well with this action. It actually gives it a fresh pace, and they've balanced that out very perfectly. So Grace is the classic survival horror return to form. Limited resources, inventory tension, more avoid and survive than clear the room. You're thinking about what to carry, what to save, what to combine, and you really need to think forward, because if you use that one stim on an enemy to take him out, you go around the corner and you wish you haven't misused it maybe 5 minutes before that. So the question is, when are you going to take a risk with Grace? That's classic Resident Evil pressure, if you ask me. And then Leon comes in, which is more a RE4 style, confidence and action. And let me make a note, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be that only guy. I know Resident Evil 4 is, for a lot of people, one of the best games ever created. I liked it. But again, as I've just told you, Resident Evil for me is more Grace process. So I never really had that same feeling with Resident Evil 4. What? What the fuck? Good game, fantastic game, but it was more linear and action oriented from a setup, so I never actually bought into that enormously. But what we get in this game with Leon, the whole energy shift, it's a complete energy shift. More momentum, more confidence in combat, more action pacing. It feels like Capcom is actually saying, here's the survival horror, now here's the release valve. Right? It builds up with Grace, and then you finally have that, oh, okay, let's go, let's be a bit overpowered. It works because it creates a certain rhythm, right? It's tension, release, tension again, escalation. That is actually what you see in that game on a constant mode. Requiem doesn't burn you with non-stop fear, and it doesn't lose atmosphere by becoming a pure action shooter. It balances, and that's why it feels like a return to form for the whole series, not just one era. It takes what worked on, and you have people who actually like the inventory management and the helplessness, and you have people like the action oriented, and they blend it together perfectly. Kudos to Capcom on this. So the fifth one is the story and the pacing, and here I do need to make a short spoiler light nuance here. There can be a bit spoilers here, right? If you haven't played this game, just skip to the next section then, I would say. I'm trying to avoid spoiling major beat, because the pacing in Requiem is one of the biggest wins they have currently. Because what the pacing gets right, it starts grounded, then steadily escalates. It gives you the time to absorb environments, that's the classic RE strength, and it uses character switching to keep the campaign feeling fresh. The story also leans in what Resident Evil always did best. Personal trauma, bio-horror mystery, what happened here, investigation energy, solving the puzzles, and that creeping sense that you're walking into something bigger than you actually understand. And because the game tone is so confident, it doesn't need to sprint. It let the dread build over time. And to me, that is what the story really does well. It's the pacing, it's a marathon, we can build it up. That is exactly what a Resident Evil game eventually should be. Now, before we jump into any conclusions, let's just visit a few things that I actually think are weird design choices. There was a very short period in this game, and it actually is in the first 30 minutes of the game, that I almost said, okay, this is going to be bullshit. I'm going to stop playing this game, because if we're going to, I know I'm going to nitpick a bit here, and maybe you come, you're just. This is just what I felt, So the game starts, and in the first few minutes, Grace is selected as an FBI field agent, really showcasing mental issues with the place she needs to go. And that's not weird, because her mother is not murdered at that spot, butchered at that spot, in front of her eyes. From that standpoint, there is no reason why any commander in charge of an FBI department with field agents would think it's a good idea to send Grace to specifically that spot. And the second weird thing is she's sent out with no partner. In what freaking universe is it? Why not give her a partner that makes it a bit more believable, and then the partner gets killed in the first 5 minutes, almost on the same pot as her mother, and she's locked in, and now she can only push forward. That would have sold it a bit more for me. And the first 3 minutes when arriving on the scene would have been already 500 reasons to call him backup. She's an FBI field agent, able to carry and handle a gun and to make good decisions. So the first few minutes would already be, okay, I need backup here. This is way above my head. And on top of that, she's a field agent from the FBI. So in what freaking universe does she hold a gun like a little girl that has never seen a gun before? She is constantly frightened, and I miss the progression a bit for her. In every Resident Evil game, you start out small, underpowered, but there were always these certain period of times that you are getting a bit more power. You will find the rocket launcher, you will find the acid rounds, and so on. You'll find the shotgun, blah, blah, blah. Overall, the loadout you start with is fairly the loadout you end up with Grace. And for me, it feels at times that on purpose, Grace is being held down to serve the overall gameplay in the first half of exploring, feeling underpowered, focusing more on evasion, and which is fine, but I would have loved to see that being balanced out a bit. But again, this is just nitpicking. This is not at all an issue for the overall game, which for me can be easily Game of the Year. What is then the overall conclusion that we can make? Requiem is a return to form, 100%. It respects what Resident Evil made Resident Evil, what made it iconic. The fear of scarcity, right? Inventory management, the atmosphere overall, the puzzle box locations in some of the puzzles that are a notch to past puzzles. And the release of action when it matters, especially with the Leon sections. It looks unbelievable, even on the base PS5. And the PS5 Pro enhancements, especially image reconstruction and performance options, make it one of the best technical horror showcases on consoles right now. If you're a classic RE fan, Grace is going to hit that sweet spot for you. If you're an RE4 fan, Leon will delivers for you right at the get-go. And somehow, this game blends both without losing any identity. So, my question to you, are you Team Grace or are you Team Leon? Drop a comment, love to hear from you. Have you already played it? And what would you rate Resident Evil 9 Requiem, and is this Game of the Year for you? For now, thank you for your attention. See you on the battlefield. Moment 6 out.